Good morning. Welcome to, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whenever you're watching this. Welcome to the first day of Compassion Camp. And we are very excited. I'm excited about everything that you're going to experience this week and a little bit to start about compassion. And first of all, did you know that sometimes the human expressions are contagious? So I don't know if you've ever noticed or not, but sometimes when somebody in your family yawns, or somebody in the classroom or wherever else yawns, the other people around them, or you'll hear somebody else do it, a yawn is actually contagious. It's been scientifically proven that when one person yawns, it makes somebody else do that. And I invite you to try that out where you are, with whoever you're watching this with. Try having somebody yawn and see if somebody else does it. And after you try yawning, maybe you just did. Try laughing, try smiling, try frowning, and try crying. And see if any of those emotions are contagious. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Again, laughing, smiling, frowning, or crying, and seeing if any of those are contagious as well as yawning. And after you've had a minute to do that, you can pause. After you've had a minute to do that, which expressions are more contagious than other ones? Is it difficult for you to laugh or cry like on command, kind of like actors or actresses do? Think about how difficult that might be for them to just have to cry on command when they're filming something. When you see someone else cry, how does that make you feel? One of your friends or your family members, think about how do you feel when you see that happens. We're talking about compassion. Again, Compassion Camp this week. And when you see someone express an emotion, laughing or crying or yawning or kind of thing, your brain responds because you know what it's like to be sad or to be happy or to yawn or to be tired. You know that. And this is called empathy. When we know what it is like to feel something that somebody else is feeling, then it helps us become more compassionate towards one another. So an example, let's say if you have Legos in your home, or it could be anything else, and you see somebody else step on a Lego. You may feel for that person because even though you didn't step on the Lego, you have stepped on something before, and you know that that hurts. That's very painful to step on something. The bottom of your feet are sensitive. And so your brain kind of reminds you of what it's like to step on something like that, and you feel sorry. You feel empathy or compassion for the other person having that happen. And that's what compassion is. You see somebody else's hurt, you feel somebody else's hurt in empathy, and you then offer sympathy, or you try to help somebody else feel better in that situation. In order to show that kind of empathy, we actually need to see one another, to pay attention to what's going on around us. And that's the beginning of compassion. When we gather around a table and we look into each other's eyes or hear each other's voices, we begin to understand how we are all feeling. It's why it's so important that we welcome other people to the table, and it's why I chose to sit behind a table this morning. It can be a kitchen table, it can be the communion table in church, it can be a lunch table at school, or it can be a digital table online, as we're having to do that with COVID. And when we welcome different people, we are able to show more empathy. And I want you to think about that. That might be true. When you have met other people at school that come from different places or live in different areas or have different experiences, you learn from them. That's part of what empathy is. I invite you to listen to the song called Come to the Table, and you can pause while you do that. And it's to remind us that at God's table, everyone is welcome. Jesus talks about this all throughout the scriptures, that in God's kingdom and in God's house and at God's table, everyone is welcome. And we're reminded of that when we celebrate communion. Everybody is welcome at a table that belongs to God, because we are all a beloved creation of God. So take a moment and listen to the song. Our Bible story today is a family party where everybody was celebrating around a meal. But one family member was not too happy about this party. And Pastor Maggie and I will read that in just a minute. But before we move on to the rest of our activities for the day, we want to open with a prayer. So what I invite you to do is place one hand on your head and one hand on your heart. And we're doing this because compassion happens in our brains, but we also often feel it in our hearts. And I invite you to repeat after me. Welcoming God, your warm, wide arms are always open. Draw us into your heart full of love. Make our arms your own, helping us see and welcome with compassion all those we meet. Amen.
Jesus told this parable. There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger brother greedily demanded his inheritance, turned his back on his family, and left them for a faraway country. He wasted all the money he took from his family.
Soon he became needy and hungry. Even though he felt ashamed, he decided to return home, hoping his father might welcome him back. When his father saw him, he was filled with compassion. He ran out to his son and threw his arms around him. He was so happy he was alive. The father got a big dinner together with the best food and drink to give thanks for his son's safe return.
Meanwhile, the older brother came in from the fields, tired from working hard all day. When he heard the music and dancing, he became very angry and refused to go in. His father went to the older brother to persuade him to come, but he said, "I've listened to you and worked hard for you all these years, and you've never given me a party. My brother comes home after wasting all his money, and you throw him a huge party?"
His father said to him, "Son, I love you. You know what is mine is yours, but people matter more than possessions. We thought we lost your brother from our family, but he's home. Come to the table and celebrate with us." Did we mess up the order there?
No,
Okay.
that's what you wanted to do.
Right. Right. Okay. Sorry. I'll just edit this again.
Were you
No, I got
wanting
it.
to, I thought you were wanting to finish and then go straight into
Right,
it.
and that's fine.
Okay.
I can edit this part out.
Okay.
When we listen to stories, we can learn so much from the feelings of the people. This is one way we learn compassion. We see, listen, and recognize what people are feeling, and this helps us to feel their joy and their hurt with them. Sometimes it requires a bit of imagination on our part because the story might not tell us directly what other people are feeling. For example, we might focus on the younger brother and father, but the older brother has something important to show us too. Compassion helps us to see how every human being is important and loved by God.
So there are some questions about this story, and I'll pause just for a moment after each one, and you can think about them and share your answers with whoever you're with right now. The first question is, what did the father see? Did you see what the father saw? How about the younger brother? What about the older brother? What feelings did you feel when you heard the story? And here's the last question. Who shows compassion and who receives compassion?
I want to invite you to do a little bit of imagining. Do you think the older brother ever came down to the party? And if he did, do you think he sat down at any of the tables and joined his family? Who might he have sat with? Do you think he sat at the table with his dad and his brother? If not, when do you think they might have had a meal together again? Who sits with you at the dinner table or at your dinner table? What do you talk about when you're eating? And how do you welcome each other when someone's had a hard day or doesn't want to sit at the table?
Sit on the floor, legs crossed. Take 3 deep and slow breaths together, with one person saying the following during inhales and exhales. Inhale, I see. Exhale, you're welcome. Inhale, I see. Exhale, you're welcome. Inhale, I see. Exhale, you're welcome. Move into child's pose. Kneel forward, big toes together, knees making a V, and stretch your arms forward. Let your forehead rest on the ground. Stay in this position for as long as it feels comfortable for the people in your group while in this pose. One person can say, child's pose is a position where we connect with God's creation and God's spirit. Within each of us, we bow our bodies and our hearts. From child's pose, move into tabletop pose. Feel the steadiness of the pose and how your hands and knees plant onto the ground. One person can say, the table is a place of regrounding. Feel your steadiness. There is a room for everyone at God's table. From table pose, stretch your hips up, your legs back, and your arms straight into downward facing dog. Hold this pose while breathing in and out a few times. One person can say, we let ourselves be stretched and prepared to see what's to come. From downward facing dog, lower your hips into plank pose, then lower further to the ground. Straighten your arms and stretch your upper body, your head towards the sky, into upward facing dog. Hold this pose while breathing in and out a few times. One person can say, we face the sun and welcome what this day holds for us. From upward facing dog, lower your upper body back to the ground. Then push your hips and legs up into downward facing dog once more. From downward facing dog, jump both feet forward or step one foot then the other. To meet your hands, slowly roll your back up until you are standing straight and tall in mountain pose. If desired, flow through this same sequence 2-3 more times. From standing position, lower your arms to touch the ground, then kneel into tabletop. Move through the sequence again, focusing on breath and flow. Reach your arms up to the sky, then draw them into a prayer form, right by your heart. End with a bow of your head and hands as you share the foundational yoga greeting, Namaste, a call to see one another the way God sees each of us. One interpretation of the phrase is, the light in me sees the light in you.
So today we talked and learned about compassion and how the beginning of compassion is seeing other people. It's one of the most true and honest ways that we live out God's compassion. And when we really see other people, when they're sad or happy or lonely or scared or hurt, then we begin to feel it with them. And that's what empathy is. So I invite you to think about, did you see sadness today? Did you see joy today? Did you see any hurt today? And that's the beginning of compassion, seeing what someone is feeling, and then we use our empathy to feel what they feel. And if our compassion is strong, then we offer to help them. We try to help them where they are and help them feel better and remind them that they are loved by God. When we see and welcome each other, we make ourselves open to God's spirit of kindness. I invite you again to listen to the Come to the Table song and sing along this time now that you've heard it if you want to. So you can pause and take a few minutes to do that. We have discussed about how when we gather around a table, even if we're doing it online like this, we can see and feel the emotions that are present around the table when we're gathered together. In our Bible story today, the father saw and welcomed his younger son. He showed compassion when he saw his son's shame and sadness. The father welcomed him back home. But sometimes we forget that the father also showed compassion to the older brother by seeing his hurt and his frustration. And he showed compassion and welcomed the older brother into the celebration as well. The father reminded both of the brothers that they are fully loved no matter what. And we're going to end again with our prayer that we did earlier, our compassion prayer. And I ask you again to place one hand on your heart and one hand on your head. Because compassion happens in our brains, but also we often feel it in our hearts. Once again, welcoming one, your warm, wide arms are always open, drawing us in to your heart full of love. Make our arms your own, helping us see and welcome with compassion all those we meet. Amen. Thank you for joining us today. You are invited to use the coloring pages and also to do what's called the examine, where you just take a few moments to think about your day and to talk about it. So you're invited to do that when you're finished. Thanks.